All right. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
We are going to continue in Reish Ayin Gimel. We were in Sif Daled. Should open up our shulchan here also. Ready? Okay, Reish Ayin Gimel Sif Daled. We read the Shulchan Aruch, most of it, I should say. The Mechaber's opinion is that someone who makes kiddush for other people, even though they will not consume any food with them at this meal, may do so. And we said that even though usually the bracha for wine, borei pri hagafen, or any birchat hanehenin, blessing that you make before you eat food, you're not allowed to make that for somebody else unless you're also nehene, unless you also benefit. That's just a rule on a typical Tuesday, not just about Shabbos. But this is an exception because the Borei Pri Hagafen is considered a part of the Kiddush. It's part of the mitzvah of Kiddush, and therefore you may recite the Borei Pri Hagafen and the Mekadesh HaShabbos blessing for somebody else, even though you will not benefit along with them. You're not going to have your Seudah here. You're going to have your Seudah somewhere else. But this could help somebody who doesn't know Hebrew, who is unfamiliar with how to make Kiddush. Again, today we have Sidurim that are so widespread that, it's hard to imagine a Jewish household now that doesn't have a Sidur, whether they're Orthodox or not, and that the blessing isn't there somewhere to be read. But in a world not that long ago, yeah, what was that?
I can imagine.
You can imagine, right?
A lot.
Yeah. All right. There, the people need help with Kiddush. They don't have the blessing. So
then he'll have to make Kiddush on his own somewhere else that he's going to eat.
Yes, correct, for sure. Yeah, that's correct. That is undoubtedly the case. So, and we even said, the Ramah threw in there that even Kiddush on Shabbos morning, the same would apply. You would have the same rule that you can make Kiddush. Thank you, Yair. You can make Kiddush for somebody else, and the Kiddush for the daytime is just simply only the Borei Pri Hagafen, which is maybe a little bit more of a surprise because you're like, okay, like it's not like the Friday night that's a mitzvah d'oraisa, and it's a more serious situation. I don't know. I'm not sure where he is today. We're recording this. You can watch it. He's not recording if he's not here. So that's what we was the last thing we had said. We'd done we'd read Sifkat and Yud Ches in the Mishnah Berurah. Now, before we read Yud Tes, though, I want to, which talks about the Kiddush of the daytime. I did want to read something from the Aruch HaShulchan, just because I thought the way he wrote this was really, I don't know, beautiful. I don't know what the right word is here, but I thought it was very meaningful to me. So I'm going to read this. Hopefully, it'll be meaningful to you. So he says, Yochol Adam lekadesh lacherim bein anashim uvein nashim bein gedolim bein ketanim. A person can make kiddush for others, whether it's men or women, adults or minors. Afal pi she'eno ochel imahem. Yes, yes. Afal pi she'eno ochel imahem bekan uledidei lo also lo hakiddush bekan. Even though you're not eating with them, and for the one making kiddush, this kiddush actually doesn't count for them because they're not eating there. But for the person who is listening, that is their place where they will eat their meal, and therefore they are yotzei through the kiddush. Because why? We hold this principle: a person can help others discharge their obligation, even though they've already fulfilled their own obligation. Or I haven't fulfilled my obligation yet, my personal obligation. And it's not like blessings where you benefit, like on foods. Unless you also benefit, as we said before. He says, why? The mitzvah shani, commandment is different. The cave and the al Da'al hashomim mutal chovas hamitzvah lekayim. Because it's on those who hear, right? Who are Da'al hashomim. It's on the listener. They also have an obligation to fulfill the mitzvah. And therefore, Kol Yisrael Arevim Zebazeh. All of Israel are guarantors for one another. And even though, so one can help his friend fulfill the mitzvah, even though one doesn't have that obligation right now. I discharge my obligation. So it's not even a question. Of course, I could do the Kiddush bracha, the Mekadesh Hashamas bracha for somebody else. Not even a question. But I could even make the Bar Pri Agafen for the other person. And even though I'm not able to make a bracha for one and for other people on a different occasion, even on other Shabbos, different time on Shabbos. If I don't benefit with them, it is like the Bar Gafen is like the Birchas HaMitzvah. It's not quite a Birchas HaNeh, it is a Birchas HaNeh as well, but it also functions in the world of Birchas HaMitzvah in this case, and you can discharge others' obligations. The same goes for the Kiddush of the daytime. It's just the Bar Gafen. We call Mikra Kiddush, but we call it Kiddush. It is a mitzvah. The Hava Birchas HaMitzvos. It is also, it counts as a Birchas HaMitzvah. V'uadin kesha HaKiddush hu alapas. And if the bracha is made on bread, the Kiddush bracha, then you may make them hamotzi on their behalf. We'll talk about that more in a moment, about if it's not being used though for Kiddush, then it's not so simple to say that you could just say make a hamotzi for somebody else on Shabbos day. We're going to talk about that. Okay. No, there was one other thing I think I wanted to. He says here in the next paragraph. Again, I'm sorry, I don't have this in front of you. This is when a person can't make kiddush for themselves, which the Shulchan Aruch had said. But if they can, but if they can do it on their own, then don't do this. They can do it themselves. If I'm not being yotzei through the kiddush, let them do it. Don't get involved in this. Unless you're going to also be yotzei, don't do it for others if they can do it for themselves. Right? Why? It's a little bit of a strange, puzzling thing. Why is that important? Now, this is the part where part of why I wanted to share this, because the Mishnah doesn't get into this quite as much. Yeah.
As I say, so if you make Kiddush, the man makes Kiddush in shul, so he goes home, usually you make Kiddush for your family.
Right.
But here he would say it's no good.
If you were already yotzei, correct.
Right.
Yeah, he'd say that you shouldn't do that. Right. By the way, he's not here today, but that's a point that Simeon has made actually a few times, which is that if the man has already discharged his obligation, how can he go home and make the Kiddush for his wife? Particularly Shabbos day, because you have the Kiddush here in shul, and you eat a little bit of the shkam minyan or whatever, the regular Kiddush, and then you go home when the spouse, the wife didn't go to shul. So how can you make Kiddush for her? Actually, it's not ideal. It sounds like if they can do it themselves.
So it's not
So we're going to talk about it today. Actually, we're going to get to it today. It's Tifei, that's a Suda, according to the Gaonim, is minimally mizonos. Like if you have some crackers, you have cholent. On Friday night. Well, that's the reason that Friday night Kiddush is because of any potential guests who may come through the community. But we don't actually eat there. That's why I give it to the kid, usually if there's a kid there, because I don't want to get involved with the situation of I drank something, I made Kiddush, and I was trying to be Yotze because I drank from it, but it wasn't really the place where I was eating the meal. So it's questionable whether or not I can really do that. So ideally, we try to avoid this whole question, and we give it to a child, so that you do something. No, we give it to a katan because you don't. Why? Because you don't have. You're a big katan. But you're a medium. Because why? Because you don't have yet until your bar mitzvah. You don't have the obligation to necessarily be worried about every single deal. We're educating you so that when you get to being a bar mitzvah, you'll know what to do. That's right now the stage we're at. Okay, all right. Now the other thing. So why? So he says here, it's better to do this. But he says, "Aval im gam hu tzarich lekiddush zeh." He says, but if let's say I need the kiddush and you need the kiddush, so should we just each make our own kiddush? By the way, I've been to people's houses and they go, Rabbi, do you want to make your own kiddush? And I said, no, of course. Like the Balabai said, I'm good. And actually, he says it a lot stronger here. You shouldn't even ask people that. You know, if everybody needs kiddush, better that you should make kiddush for everybody. Why? Of course, everybody could make kiddush for themselves. Mishum, why? The principle, Barovam Hadras Melech. Because the idea that when you do things as a Barov Am and the setting of a bigger group, it shows more it's kavod for the Melech, for the king. There's another simon, right? This is the minhag. Many people do it. You go to a group, there's a group setting, one person makes the group. Right? And if you sit around the table and there are a few families around the table, yes, kedai, one person should make a bracha. We're a big group. Barovam Hadras Melech. Right? V'yesh bekomo shekol echad osa kiddush atzmo. And he says there are places where each one makes their own bracha. Vein ro'al asos kain. He says, I don't know, that's the best thing you should do. V'yesh lemonami zeh. We should prevent people from doing this. U'elam dam sheyesh yoseh mitzvah k'shechad yikadosh b'ad kulam. Teach them that one person making a bracha for everybody, there's something very special about that. V'yachavein lahotziam v'hei mechavnu lotzes. And tell everybody, yeah, you'll be yotzei with my bracha. Uvilvad sheyishmu haKiddush merosh v'yad sof v'yanu amen. But of course, make sure you hear the kiddush from the beginning to the end. Sometimes when you go to these big meals like in the shul, and it's so hard to hear sometimes, that's where you have to be careful because you have to hear the kiddush from start to finish, and you miss a part of the kiddush. It was noisy at the beginning of the kiddush, whatever it is. And, okay, then maybe you make your own kiddush on the side. But otherwise, you should try to say amen and be. And by the way, which is very important rule. 1 second, it's an important rule. This applies to a lot of any birchas hamitzvah that you're being yotzei from somebody else. V'lo ya'anu baruch hu baruch shemo. You should not say baruch hu baruch shemo. The zeu hefsek. It is a break. Ve'eno yotzei ba'bracha. Sometimes you'll hear on Rosh Hashanah. This is the most often time when you hear it, or Kriyas HaMegillah. You're being yotzei through the bracha for the shofar or the Megillah. Don't say baruch hu baruch shemo because then you interrupted in the middle of what's your bracha. So if if you're being yotzei through a bracha, you don't say baruch hu baruch shemo. So if somebody says, Amotzi at the table, right? For the bracha, don't say Baruch Baruch Shemo. Now, and that's obvious, but that should be for any mitzvah. For any mitzvah, you're being yotzei through somebody else. You don't say Baruch Baruch Shemo, which is, by the way, why some people, I think my Rebbe was makbid on this. He doesn't say Baruch Baruch Shemo during the Amida, when somebody doing the repetition, because he's saying, I'm discharging my communal obligation for Shmona Esrei, the communal aspect of tefillah. And so I believe, and I've been a year since I've been in shir, we've been davening with him, but I believe he said this, which was that he doesn't say Baruch Baruch Shemo. And that's the reason, because if you see yourself as being as Rav Soloveitchik used to say that there's a mitzvah, a tefillas hatzibur, the prayer of the community, and I'm part of that tefillah. That's so he doesn't say Baruch Baruch Shemo. I may after every bracha, but not Baruch Shemo because you don't want to interrupt the bracha because that's my bracha too. Many people say no. It's the Chazan repeats the Amida for those who didn't understand how didn't know how to daven. Maybe it is a communal, but a tefillah, but I don't have a personal obligation in that. So you say Baruch Baruch Shemo. That's where that machlokas comes from. Some people don't say Baruch Baruch Shemo in the Shmona Esrei.
You said your Shmona Esrei. Then you'd say the Cholatot if you're from the Chazan, it's like a double play. I mean, double daven. You're not supposed to double daven.
Right. That's why. So Rav Soloveitchik had this interesting chap, which was that you have your tefillas, yachid, you have your own personal obligation to daven, but then there's a prayer, there's a community prayer. Like the community has to daven. That's part of why he says that there's a repetition of the Shemona Esrei, and then we continue to do this today, even though people daven, from Sidurim on their own for the most part. And so that's a slightly different obligation. It's a communal obligation, and I have a chalik in the community. And I don't know what Rav Soloveitchik's practice was. I'm not sure. I think there are probably ways to find this out. There are Sidurim that have covered all of his minhagim. So I'm sure we could find that out. But that was his concept. That there's a little bit of a different obligation when it comes to the repetition of the Shemona Esrei. That there's a communal obligation, which I have a chaylik in.
So except on Pesach, so at Seder, we have the minhag that all the men make Kiddush.
Oh, they kiddush. Yeah, it doesn't have to be though. But
I think a lot of places
I don't think
do
it's a
that.
great minhag.
We have a minhag that everybody at the table says it together,
everyone says it
Yeah.
together,
women and men.
right? Yeah, okay. I'm not saying people should change their minhagim though. That's the minhag is if you don't want to play with minhag. But again, it doesn't say that it's halachically wrong. He just says like it's a nice thing that you should do it all together because of the concept of Rovam Hadras Melech. We're one big group.
What
What was that?
Matzah. You make your own.
No. Well, I shouldn't say that. No, I mean the head of each of the family
Has their own
families
three
have their
matzahs.
own- Right.
So, I once saw that talking about that how important it is for having one leader at a Seder, because it's, I wish I could remember where I saw this. But that,
I mean,
that the original practice of on Pesach was people had to have a reshima, they had to be signed on to a Pesach, certain particulars Pesach.
for Korban.
Right.
Korban.
Right.
And if the korban was too big for one family, you invite other
Right.
families.
Right.
So, and they would be tied together by a reshima. It was important that they did everything as a group. And since the Seder we have today is like somewhat of a Zeichel Mikdash, it's better to do it as a group.
Uh-huh.
One
Right.
leader.
So it's interesting. The Gemara, this is the side point. I'm going right back to this. The Gemara talks about that they would remove the Seder tables. They used to have PV dinner trays. They didn't have like dining room tables, and so the custom was that they would remove that from in front of the person who led the Seder, and implying that there was there was one person. But on the other hand, one of the challenges of having only one set of matzahs and take this from somebody who only uses one set of matzahs is that if you don't have it for every family that's sitting around the table, then you run into a kazayas problem. You have to start adding. Some people like to the dafka when you eat the matzah for the mitzvah. It should be one of the three matzahs. So you can give them a little bit, but then they have to add otherwise. And that's which is fine. I'm not saying that
Yeah. They didn't say the problem is the afikomen.
Exactly right.
Afikomen is a big. How do you get a kazayas of the afikomen? Yes, you get a little from that, and you have to fill them. Yeah,
If the kid falls asleep, you don't know where the African is.
That's right. You take matzah achrona. What the Gemara really calls it. Okay.
Rabbi, quick question. Are you saying that when you during the Seder, when you drink the wine or eat anything, only one person says the bracha, and not everybody says the bracha? No, I'm not talking the Kiddush. I'm talking about the bracha.
Again, it could be done either way. The truth is, it could be done either way. If one person makes the bracha, other people say amen. It should work. There does seem to be this minhag. I acknowledge it too, by the way. I see it at my own table, where people make the bracha. So you get to the end of Magid and they make the bracha of Gal Yisrael, which again, one person could make and be Yotzei other people. It's not, but everybody makes the bracha. Everybody makes the Baruch Hagafen. There's something about the Seder. I don't know. Everyone wants to feel like I'm not poo-pooing it. Like everyone wants to feel like they have a chelik in it. So, in terms of the bracha, everyone wants to.
A chelik is important.
Yeah, that's right. Very good. Anywho, all right. Now let's go to back in the Mishnah Berurah here. Sifkat on your test. Now we're gonna put pedal to the metal. Here we go. All right. This is talking about that the Mishnah Berurah says, the Ramah says that you can make kiddush for somebody else, even Shabbos day, which is just Borei Priya Gafen. So Sifkat and Yud Test. Rotze Lomar. What does he mean to say here? Af disham kol hakiddush hurak Borei Priya Gafen levad. Even though the whole kiddush is just Borei Priya Gafen by itself, we call mokom kaven Tehi mitzvah, since it is a mitzvah, the ikaro niskan shelo b'shvil hana ela mitzvah alav kishar mitzvahs. Why was this instituted? It wasn't because it was, it wasn't about getting benefit from the wine. It was because it was a mitzvah. That's why we were told to do this. Ela mitzvah alav kishar mitzvahs. It's like any other mitzvah. It's like any other mitzvah. Mishum hache acher ma'afal pi she'eino motzi acher ma'afal pi she'eino nene. Therefore, you can be discharge others' obligations, I guess, even though you don't benefit personally. Ki kiddush halela, just like the kiddush of the nighttime. Okay. V'lo dami levirchas hamotzi shel Shabbos shekol shalosh seudos.
What is that?
Motzi im eino ochel imohem. Good morning, Simeon. How you doing? We're in the middle of Sifkat. We're in the middle
I got it, Rob. I got it.
You're with us. Okay, great. So,
Okay.
and it's not like the bracha of Hamotzi for all the shalosh seudos of Shabbos. There, you're not allowed to discharge somebody's obligation if you don't eat with them. If you're eating with them, you can make Hamotzi. One person. By the way, the shul I was a rabbinic intern. Now it's really a long time ago. Probably 12 years ago at this point, I was a rabbinic intern in a shul in New Jersey, in Highland Park, New Jersey. Fun fact, Rabbi Ariel Schneider was also a rabbinic intern in that shul many years later. So there you go. The rabbi there, Chalashudas, their custom was, I don't know if this was just for financial reasons, they didn't want to buy tons and tons of challah rolls. What they did was they had, I think they had lechem mishnah, and the rabbi, after everybody washed, would make hamotzi and cut slices for everybody. So there, it makes sense. You can make one person get hamotzi, and everybody benefits. Even a shalashudas, it's not a problem. And not just on Friday night and Shabbos. Even shalashudas, you could do that. You could have one person make hamotzi and hand out pieces of challah to everybody. At shalashudas, here our custom is that everybody has their own challah roll.
Yeah, but
One person could, but we don't. Everyone makes hamotzi on their own. The reality. We don't have one communal hamotzi. Now,
Rob,
yeah.
Are we to learn from this that Friday night, after everybody washes, and let's say the balabayas is running the show, and he makes the motzi, each individual must also recite the motzi?
No, it's only we're comparing this to the wine, where I can emote the others even if I don't drink the wine. I could just make kiddush, and they can drink it, right? Because they're going to have their meal here. I can help them discharge their kiddush obligation, but I can't do the same when it comes to the hamotzi at the 3 Shabbos meals. I cannot just say hamotzi on behalf of somebody else. And you say, well, why would I ever anyway do that? Some people didn't know the bracha back in the day. Right? I think I've cited this Gemara in the Yerushalmi before, that people didn't know how to say a basic brachos of Borei Priya Gafen, Borei Priya Eitz, Borei Priya Dama. They never figured out how to memorize it, or it wasn't part of their, So you can imagine it's possible that somebody, would need somebody to say hamotzi for them, but you can't do that. You can't make hamotzi on behalf of somebody else unless you're also going to eat with them. If you're eating with them, then you can make the hamotzi for them and yourself.
Yeah, what about the relationship between the balabayas and all the rest of the Mesubin that are sitting around, and he makes the motzi, takes a bite, slices the challah, distributes it. We are saying each individual must also make a motzi.
No. Only that would only be the case if you're eating with them, then you're also eating some of that bread, that challah. Then no, they don't need to make their own bracha. It's like any berachas ha'anen. If I make a bracha and I benefit, and you're also going to benefit from it, you don't need to make the bracha. You can just listen to my bracha, say amen. The only problem is that there's a rule that if I, as the balabayis, am not going to eat the challah, I can't make hamotzi for you. You would need to make it for yourself.
Okay, thank you, Rav.
Yeah, and he says here, he continues, the Mishnah Berurah continues, the af shehem chov. Now, why is this different, really? I have an obligation to eat challah, right? To eat bread on Shabbos. It's not like a Wednesday or a Friday, Friday morning or afternoon. If I choose to eat bread during the week, that's my own prerogative, But on Shabbos, I do have an obligation, I thought, to eat Friday night, Shabbos day, I have to eat bread. So why can't I actually, in theory, make hamotzi for somebody else, even though I'm not going to benefit from it right now? That would make it like more like a birchas mitzvah. He says, even though there is an obligation to have bread, to make hamotzi, ein hachov alav mishum mitzvah. It's not that obligation is on you because it's itself a mitzvah. Ela kadeshi yehanemi seuda Shabbos. It's rather that I have to benefit from this, from having a seuda Shabbos. Ve'en laha mitzvah asma chov, and by itself, the challah, the bread is not an obligation. The bread by itself is not an obligation. Now he's going to give a different proof here in a second, but I want to almost like bolster this argument. It's not that, when it comes to the wine itself is intrinsically a part of the mitzvah. By the way, the proof is that Shabbos day, the only part of the mitzvah is to say the Borei Pri Hagafen. There is no other words that really need to be said. But when it comes to the challah, it's not that I need to eat challah. It's that I need to eat a meal. What is the means to eating a meal? Bread. But it's not like the intrinsic in the bread is the mitzvah. The bread is the means by which I fulfill the mitzvah. As opposed to the wine is how I do Kiddush. I can't do Kiddush, by the way, to the point where if I don't have wine, this is in the Gemara Pesachim, when it talks, and also this appears in Brachos, I believe, as well. If I don't have wine, Beis Hillel, according to the Rashbam, says I can't make Kiddush. If I have no wine available or no bread as the backup, I cannot make Kiddush. That's how important and that's how intrinsic the wine is to the mitzvah. But the bread when I start the meal, it's just a means to fulfilling the mitzvah of the seuda. And that's the difference here. Now he goes further in a further proof of this, and he says here, and we'll get to this probably in a number of months. He's going to talk about that. Yes, but then that challah, that bread is in place of the wine. That you're right. Then you can make hamotzi bread. But we're gonna actually he's about to that in 3 lines. So he says here though, what's the proof that the bread doesn't count in this way, like the wine? If you turn to Reish Peches and you go over there, it's an interesting statement. We'll get to it probably in a few months, which is that the discusses: can you fast on Shabbos? Can you do certain things that you would not usually do on Shabbos? And the answer is, well, maybe it depends. If for you eating is harmful, so again, I go back to think about someone who's got a medical issue, and maybe eating for them is really not the right thing at this moment, right? It actually could be harmful for them, so then they have no obligation to eat, right? This person benefits more from misane, from fasting, than they don't need to eat. There's no obligation to get involved in this. So therefore, he can't be motzi others if he doesn't eat with them. So it just shows you that there are certain circumstances where eating is not on the table on Shabbos, and I think he's trying to say, and therefore, how can you say that the bread is so is such an important part that I can be motzi others? I can no. The bread sometimes in certain circumstances is not even part of the calculation. And then if I can't have a seuda, then it goes back to, because I'm for a medical issue, whatever. Then it goes back to, okay, then I'm putter from kiddush. Well, you don't say, oh, you're putter from hamotzi. No, you just can't make hamotzi because you can't eat. But we will say you're putter from the mitzvah of kiddush.
So what's his
because
comment?
you can't do kiddush from makom seuda. Sorry.
His comment in the Sharat Siyun?
He says here, as eno yochol lekadesh b'shachris. Af im yirtze lite makos la'acher the ein kiddush al makom seuda aval lo dehu pater mi mitzvah. What's he saying here? Sorry, let me. Sorry, im nehu nehena mimash yisana ein tzarich le'achol umemela, and therefore As Eino Yochol Lekadesh B'Shar. He can't make Kiddush in the morning. This is Kaf in the Shara Tziyun. Af Im Yirtze Litein HaKos Lachem. Even if he wants to give the cup to others, right? Because he's not going to eat.
He said,
Right? He's got some medical issue, whatever. Because generally not allowed to fast on Shabbos, right? So, for whatever reason, it'll be mazik you. It's going to damage you to eat. So he cannot make Kiddush for others. The ain't Kiddush of Makom Suda. Aval lo dehu potter. Oh, he's saying you're not potter from the mitzvah. Aval lo dehu potter mitzvah, but you're not. He's saying you're not potter from the mitzvah of Kiddush. That's funny. That's kind of funny though, because how are you ever going to do the mitzvah of Kiddush if you can't eat because of I'm sure I'm not understanding something there about that. If you look at Reish Peiches,
that doesn't make sense.
You look at Reish Peiches, in 6 days over there, because the first part of that statement is that you cannot fast on Shabbos ad sheishos, to like midday, which is where the idea of having Kiddush probably in shul came from, because so much tefillah would start at 9. I don't know how it was here back in the day, folks, but where I grew up, davening used to go till noon. Okay, and I know we're this a new generation, and now davening can't go past 11:15. But when I was a kid, the sermon was 40 minutes. It was a different world, Like I remember being a kid, and I was like, wow. Like I remember the patience I had, and I sat fine next to my dad. But 12 o'clock, and which means that by the time you really get home, you're not gonna have eaten before Shay shows. I think that's probably a lot of where the very strong minhag now of having Kiddush comes from in shul. Anyways, but you're not allowed to go past 6 hours. But then he says in the Shulchan Aruch over there that but if the eating would damage you, would hurt your body, and actually it's more of a delight and a pleasure to not eat. So lo yocham, then don't eat. Right? It's Shabbos. You should be in a state of joy. And in the rare circumstance where eating hurts you, right? Then it's okay. But I'm not sure what he's saying here though, because I thought he's saying, I guess he's saying that. I'm not sure how you're. I guess he's saying it's not damaging. I guess it's not impossible. I guess it's not an impossibility from a medical perspective. He's saying it's possible. It's just that you don't enjoy the eating process, whatever that means, right? And so therefore, you can't make Kiddush as Eno Yachol Lekadesh V'Shachas Af Im Yirtze Litein HaKos Lachem. I think because you're not having the Suda there, but I thought we just said you can do that, right? I thought I can make Kiddush for you, even if I'm not having the Suda there. But I thought the reason he can't make Kiddush is because he himself is not in the category where he can eat. Or that's why about lo dehu potter mi mitzvah. That's interesting. I'm not sure what I have to. I got to do my work on that part. Not sure what he's saying in the Shara Tziyun.
Rav,
What do you think?
I'm thinking that I believe it was last week we delved into the notion of a katan and his participation, either in the mitzvah or in the wine or the bread. It seems to me that if one does not have the specific obligation on his self, then he cannot motzi others.
Right.
So he must have this obligation in order to do it. And if he has the obligation, and if he has to be the one to make the bracha, then he has to participate in the mitzvah. Otherwise, the other people he has not be motzi the other people in the kiddush.
Yeah, no, if again, as long as I have an obligation and you have an obligation for a mitzvah, I can, and even for a katan who we're being mechanech, right? I can do that.
Yes.
But here we're talking about the bread. We're talking about the hamotzi, right? That's why without this Shara Tziyun comment, I thought I understood it. Meaning because if I'm fasting and I'm not going to participate and partake in the meal, then I can't be motzi others, right? And I'm allowed to do that sometimes on Shabbos. I don't. If I benefit more from not eating than eating, then I don't have to eat on Shabbos. Which would mean that I can't. That it shows you that it's not an obligation to eat bread on Shabbos. It's not a strict obligation. If I enjoy a suda, if I enjoy eating, then I have a mitzvah to do a suda. And how do I fulfill a suda? Through bread. But the line here is now he's taking it over to Kiddush. In the Shar scene, he's almost taking it over to the Kiddush part. That's what's throwing me off here. He's saying that therefore I can't make Kiddush also for them, even though I'm not potter from the mitzvah. But I thought that's the whole point. If I do have a mitzvah still, I gotta do my homework on this one.
But you cannot fulfill the mitzvah. If you cannot fulfill the mitzvah, you cannot fulfill it for someone else.
That's not what he's saying. Unless he's saying that the mitzvah is still hanging there for you, right? And therefore, meaning because right.
Fulfill the mitzvah for someone else. If you have an obligation, you can do it somewhere else. You have an obligation and you can fulfill the mitzvah. But here in this case, you cannot fulfill it because you're not allowed to eat. So if you're not allowed to eat, then you cannot fulfill it for someone else because you cannot even fulfill the mitzvah for yourself.
Right.
That makes sense. Yes. That's consistent with what we learned.
Look, yeah, I think maybe at the end when he says there about lo dehu pater mitzvah, is that maybe what you're saying, he still has an obligation. It's not saying that the reason this doesn't work is not because he's not pater from the situation,
You just can't do that.
but because he doesn't engage in any kind of eating or whatever. Because he doesn't want to drink the wine, perhaps to start. Maybe this Steve is maybe because drinking even the grape juice is mazik me, right? And therefore, because you're not even in the parsha of drinking,
and kiddush that means you can drink the wine, but you're not going to eat, and therefore you're not
100%. But he wants to give the wine to somebody else, which you can generally do. You can do that usually, but because this is the type of person who's not going, he's going to fast. Right, he's not, that it's not that he's potter from the mitzvah. He still has the mitzvahs hanging on him, but because he's not even, he's not even in the parsha where he's going to drink wine realistically right now. Then then maybe he can't even be motzi, others with the kiddush on Shabbos day. It's an interesting comment. I'm not gonna think about that one a little more.
A couple of questions that are
Lingering.
I should have asked these, a couple of weeks ago.
Well, so actually, let's just do 3 more lines so we finish this Mishnah Berurah, and then Richie, you'll ask the question if that's okay. But in Kiddush ala pas, this was somebody brought this up a moment ago. What if you make Kiddush on the bread though? As motzi gam bevirchas hamotzi, then the hamotzi counts because then the hamotzi is the part. Then you can be motzi others because that hamotzi is a part of the Kiddush. The high birchas hamotzi ki birchas b'orpei gafen l'kiddush hayayin dami. That takes the place of the b'orpei gafen, and that one can work when it takes the place. All right, Richie, sorry, go ahead.
So a couple of questions. B'orpei gafen as a kiddush on Yom Shabbos. We never discussed why that works. I mean, there's no mention of the kedushas hayom in B'orpei gafen.
Yep.
Okay, it just talks about
just the blessing over the wine. That's it.
Yeah. How does that related to kiddush hayom?
So the whole mitzvah is mitzvah d'Rabbanan for kiddush hayom, right? It's zachwer al yayin. You're supposed to mention the holiness of Shabbos over a cup of wine, and for the daytime, which is of course nicknamed kiddusha rabbah, the great kiddush, because it's really just euphemism, right? It's not quite the great kiddush. It's just a b'orpei gafen. Is that we want to demarcate that this is a sanctified meal. That this day is sanctified. This is a sanctified, seudah I'm going to engage in. And I should use my words to I should use my words and I'll use my words. I should use in this case it's actions that sanctify. Now there are no other words to say. I said it last night though, where I talked about the holiness of Shabbos. The rabbis made of this mitzvah to have a cup of wine. when before you engage in your meal on Shabbos
And the
day.
bracha will be the kiddush.
And the bracha, and because they said I have to drink wine to start the day and to start my meal, as a way, as a show of elevating the Shabbos Suda. Therefore, I have to make a Borei Pri Hagafen, because that's like any time. So therefore, the Borei Pri Hagafen now becomes it takes on the form of a mitzvah here. That's what the Aruch HaShulchan, by the way, we were reading before says earlier. It takes on the status of a mitzvah. This Borei Pri Hagafen that's made in the context of Shabbos Hayom. By the way, to the point where if I don't know if he mentioned this or one of the extra comments here mentioned this yesterday when I was preparing. If you make Borei Pri Hagafen later on Shabbos, you can't do that for other people. Unless you also drink from that wine. But you can't then go, I've already been Yotzei, that person is Yotzei. Now I'm having wine in the afternoon. You're not doing a mitzvah. It's not a mitzvah. It's just Birchas Hanehin. So that what Chazal did was they took that Birchas Hanehin and they elevated it to a status of Birchas HaMitzvah. And that's why I can be motzi you, even though I don't drink at that point. You'll drink and you're going to have your Suda there.
Right. I still don't see the connection between the bracha and the kiddush hayom.
I don't think it's that the bracha becomes necessary, is a necessity. The Borei Pri Hagafen is a necessity to the fulfillment of the kiddush, meaning drinking of the wine. And therefore, since it's wrapped up all together, and Chazal instituted that. Like, we want you to say a Borei Pri Hagafen. Before you start this meal, we want, and it's all wrapped up together. I'll make a stronger point, by the way, even on the point that was just made that relates to this. But why can't I be motzi others in their hamotzi? I'll make it for you, and then I'm not going to. You'll eat it, and I'll have somewhere else. Because if I ate a meal on Shabbos, and I didn't make a bracha, I didn't make hamotzi. Did I fulfill my mitzvah of Suda Shabbos? Yeah. I ate a meal on Shabbos. It's not, you shouldn't do that. I'm not saying do that. But if, let's say, I forgot or whatever, and I just sat down and I ate a full meal, challah, I even had lechem mishnah. So I had because there's a mitzvah to have lechem mishnah. I should eat from lechem mishnah. And I do that. But I don't make a bracha. I still fulfill the mitzvah of lechem mishnah. By the way, how do I know that, by the way? Remember the whole thing about Torah's Mappa Mekadesh? You just bring out the challah, you don't make a bracha of hamotzi. I just take some of the lechem and I have to eat because I said lechem mishnah. I didn't make a bracha there. Now there, because I was carryover from the previous hamotzi.
So you have,
but
I guess you could eat from both challah?
No, from one of the lechem mishnah. Right. Now, if I don't on Shabbos day, if I drink wine, I don't make a bracha. Did I fulfill the mitzvah of kiddush? No way. The Borei Pri Hagafen and the drinking process of the wine is how they define the mitzvah of Shabbos morning, to elevate the meal. But it is intrinsic that I have to make a Borei Pri Hagafen and drink the wine in order to fulfill the mitzvah of kiddush. But if I don't, and I just drink wine, I don't think you fulfill the mitzvah of kiddush. Yeah.
The other half of my question was, the state lechem required to have, especially the second.
Do I need lechem mishnah?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But
not a question.
So many times when
Stop saying even by Shalosh Shudas they're makbid on that. Yeah.
Right. When you make kiddush and shul, you don't have that.
So actually, there's a line coming up, Richie, that you're going to love. Coming up in the Aruch HaShulchan, I want to share with Sifhei. But one has to view the obligation of kiddush in a separate light. This is hard because it does need to be connected to Suda. But the definition of Suda is not only bread. We're going to see that in a moment. The Shulchan Aruch is going to say that, quoting the Gaonim, is not only bread. Certainly can be bread that can define your Suda, but you can have other things that can define your Suda. So as I said, you're going to like the line about the Aruch HaShulchan because in terms of what it means, in terms of the Friday nights, that you have mentioned about some, people who have kiddush and then they have other things. But there's an obligation of kiddush and then there's an obligation of Suda. Kiddush has to be a Malkum Suda, but the Lechem Mishnah Suda might not have to be the Suda that connects to the kiddush. So we can view them in two separate lights, though the Aruch HaShulchan doesn't like it. You're going to see. So he likes everything together. We'll get there. So that's why you have to see there are two tracks. There's Kiddush, and Kiddush has to be Malkum Suda, but Suda defined by Lechem Mishnah might be its own thing, and therefore we're going to see the Shulchan Aruch is going to say he's going to explicitly address your question. So we're going to get there, hopefully in about 3-4 minutes. Okay, but you have to daven, so maybe don't worry, we'll review it next week. Sivkot and Chaf. Let's finish this last comment on the Mishnah Berurah on Dalet. The Husha and remember, there's this caveat that most the others, they can't know how to do the bracha themselves. They know how to do it themselves, right? The Yodim Lekadosh Be'atzam Eno Yochel Hotziyam B'Kiddush Shelo. Im Eno Yoseh Az Be'atzmo B'Kiddush. Unless you're also being Yotzei, you can't be most the others if they know how to make the bracha on their own, and I'm not benefiting. V'Apri Chadash. V'Apri Chadash. B'Simen Taf Kuf Pei Hey.
Doesn't mean just learn that you can do a kiddush with someone else. What does that mean? That if they don't know how to make kiddush, you cannot take.
If they don't know how to make kiddush, then I can make kiddush for them. But if they know how to make kiddush, I can't make kiddush for them unless I'm also benefiting. Right? We're all having lunch together, and I make kiddush, and I also drink. Then it's fine. But if I'm just making kiddush for you, I give you the example that we talked about last week. Or Shlomo Zalman had that shaila about the rabbi who goes in the nursing home and he goes from room to room making kiddush for the patients who don't know how to make kiddush on their own, and they can't get around to a communal kiddush, right? Even without drinking, right? And they'll drink the grape juice, That's okay because they can't make the kiddush on their own for whatever reason. But if they don't want to make kiddush on their own, they should make kiddush on their own. I can't be motzi them. That's what he says here. But the Pri Chadash is cholek, who's severe laid bechol gave yuchal lahotziyam. Pri Chadash is, come on, we're gonna give a bechina, a faher to everybody, and like, can you make kiddush on your own? Let's test it. No, you could always be motzi others, whether they know or they don't know. I don't agree with this distinction. If you could do it, if this legal reasoning works, it works across the board. And he said, then he quotes the Sefer Artos Hachayim Siman Ches Masik Gamkein the Medina Yochol Lahotzi B'Chol Gam. He also paskins that in any circumstance you can be motzi others, whether they know the bracha or not. Ach lechatchila mitzvah shikadosh b'atzmon keven shubaki. But if you know how to make kiddush on your own, and someone else is going to make kiddush for you, and they're not going to benefit yourself, like he puts the burden on the other person. Don't let somebody else be motzi you if you know how to make kiddush and they're not even going to drink. Do it yourself because you're a bucky. You have you know what to do.
So Rav, is he negating the concept of having the Balabayas and his family and his guests all independent kiddushim?
No, I think he's saying Adarabba. I think he's saying no, that's fine. But if somebody comes over to me, I'm chas v'shalom, I'm not going to use myself. There's a patient in the hospital, and they're qualified to make kiddush. They are they are a very learned person, and there's the chaplain, the rabbi is coming around the hospital. It's Shabbos. He does going around and helping any of the patients who don't know how to make kiddush, make kiddush. And he comes to this room, and the guy says, did you hear kiddush yet? Do you want me to make kiddush for you? The person should say, no, it's fine. I'll make kiddush for myself. Don't worry. I know how to make kiddush. I shouldn't rely on somebody else to make kiddush for me if I know how to make kiddush. Not unless the rabbi decides he's going to sit down in my room and have lunch with me. Then he can make kiddush for me because we're going to eat lunch together. But if he's just coming around to the rooms to make kiddush and then I'm going to drink, anyways, then I'll say the words. Not that somebody else should make the bracha for me. That's what he's saying.
I don't like
it. Simeon doesn't like it. Okay. V'gam chaveiro hamotzio eno yotzei ata b'hakiddush. Right, and then also the friend who is being motzi, who is not being yotzei right now in the kiddush. Right. So, if I know how to make kiddush and he's not going to be, he's not going to be motzi from the kiddush, I'll make the kiddush myself. It's better to do it that way. But if he doesn't, it'll be the evidence. It's still fine. Now, he says here, V'isha almana, if there's a woman who's a widow.
Guys, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Just check your email when you're done. We have to send something out after shir.
Okay, no problem. Okay, V'isha almana she'eno yodas be'atzma eich lekadesh lo tuchal likanes devayis acher lishmoa kiddush. And if there's a widow, woman who's a widow, who doesn't know on her own how to make kiddush, so you can't tell her, oh, go to another house and you'll hear kiddush. That's not unless she's eating there, right? Because she's not eating there. So go to the neighbor every week, and you'll listen to the kiddush, and then you go back and you'll eat your own food. No, Ella, you kind of somebody should come to her house and she'll make the kiddush for her. And that would work even if the person who goes over to her house is not being yotzei. Now, again, if she knows how to make kiddush on her own, she should make kiddush on her own. There is an assumption that's made here that she doesn't know how to make kiddush, which maybe was, again, there was less literacy, there was less knowledge going around out there.
He says that. She'ena yodas ba'atzma.
And here she doesn't know how to make it on her own. She doesn't have anyone else in her life who's going to make the kiddush for her, and she doesn't know it herself. Correct. If she knows it herself, she should just go ahead and make her own kiddush. Okay. Now, let's
but you just said something that somebody else can go over to her house and make kiddush for her. You said that, right?
Yeah, if she doesn't know how to make kiddush for her on her own.
But the problem when you said that is you did a runaround with the notion of ein kiddush ela b'makom suda. So if somebody goes over for her to help her, then in theory he's got to sit down and have suda.
So no, that's the point. That you can even be motzi others, even though for them it's their makom suda, and I'm going to go somewhere else. And I'll hand off, and that's what by the way, the Shulchan Aruch at the very end. Let's go back up on top. We'll finish with this after the comment of the Ramah, and after the words v'hu she'enam yodim v'im adayin lo kiddush la'atzmo. And if a person has not made kiddush for themselves, and they go ahead and they make kiddush for somebody else in the place where that person is going to have their seudah, yizaher shelo yitom imahem. I should actually be careful not to taste from the wine. Rather, what should I do? I should give it to them. I shouldn't taste anything until I'm actually in my makom seuda. But if I make the kiddush for you, I'll give you the cup and you'll drink. And that's what Simeon. So I'm not engaging in kiddush for makom seuda. I'm not drinking in my makom seuda yet. I just made the bracha for you, and I'll hand it off to you, and you'll drink it because this is your makom seuda. But you just didn't know how to make the bracha, so I'm handing it off. That's the theory behind this, and it's a mitzvah, so I can help you do your mitzvah because Kol Yisrael Reivim Zeh Bazeh. Okay, let's just read a drop of hay, and then we'll go back and we'll go through this hay more thoroughly. Hay is really the whole simon turns on Sifhen. This whole thing turns on Sifhen. Kosvu HaGaonim. The Gaonim write, Had ein kiddush el b'mkom seuda. Afilu achal davar mu'at o shosa kos yayin chchayav alav b'bracha yatsa yedei kiddush b'mkom seuda v'gomer seudas b'makom acher. The Gaonim say that when we say kiddush ein kiddush el b'mkom seuda, we say this rule, even if you eat something, a little something, or you drink, from the coast, the wine, in the amount that you are obligated to make a bracha acharona afterwards. So you eat a kazayis or you drink a revius. The minimum amount that you would need to make a bracha acharona. So it has some level of a drop of satiation. You're not full by any means, but you have some satiation from what you ate or drank. Then you are yotzei, the kiddush, the concept of kiddush b'makom seuda. You're done. You check. You got a check mark. And then the gomer seudas b'makom acher. Then you can go finish your meal somewhere else. That's what we do all the time here, by the way. We make kiddush here. We have a little seuda here. I have a little plate of cholent, a few crackers, a little cake. Am I really full? I'm not really full. They didn't have a full meal, but that is considered seuda for the purposes of this halacha. It means I ate minimally a kazayis or drank a minimum of a revius of wine. And he says here, "V'dafka achal lechem o shas le'arim." Specifically, if I eat bread or I drink wine. About achal peiros, lo. If I just have fruit, a kazayis of fruit doesn't count. After the kazayis of bread or I drink a revius of wine. And here the Mishnah Berurah jumps in, and this is, of course, opens the door to all the kiddushim that we have here in shul, and not just our shul. I'm just going to give you the couple words here. If you look at Kaf Hey, again, we're going to go back and do this next week. It's a kol shekain here, right? Oshasa yayin, the kol shekain. If you're going to say wine is okay, and wine is, I don't make a birchas hamazon on a wine, right? Kol shekain, all the more so if I eat mine targima, like sweets that are made from the chameshes haminim, the 5 grains, which would require a mazonos, then I'm yotzei kiddush b'mokom seuda. So if I have a piece of cake, I have a cracker, I eat at least a kazayis. They're more chashuv when it comes to a seuda than a wine. Wine is not a seuda. I could drink a lot of wine and be drunk, but I'm not satiated from the fact that there's a meal. I might feel full because I drank too much wine, but that's not a meal, right? And if wine can count as mokom seuda, kol shekain, I'm gonna have cake, I'm gonna have crackers. That's more of a meal than the wine is a meal. Well, aval, right? There is an aval there, right? Aval sheikh harushar mashkin. Sorry, but if you're just having schnapps, right? You're not yotzei b'mkom seuda. The low soid halev korea, that doesn't satiate the heart as much as wine does, right? And that's why there are some Rishonim. We'll go over this next week. Rabbi Akiva Eger, yes, he's an Achron, but there's some Rishonim that Rabbi Akiva Eger says, and they don't like that. You can't be yotzei suda through wine. That's cheating. That's not a suda. So therefore, he says, I don't like it. Some Rishonim don't like this, and they say you have to have food, not that wine should count, and therefore. You shouldn't rely on such an opinion that you only can drink wine and count that as makom suda. So
you can drink wine and you can say bracha
and that's it. That's kiddush makom suda. And that's why I said this whole simon turns on this. And we're going to talk more about the details of this next week. There are lots of important details to really understand here, and hopefully when we finish Tif Hey, we'll have a better understanding of how everything works. But and Richie will be back, at that point next week, because the Aruch HaShulchan, he doesn't like this whole business of you make kiddush and then you have a little this, a little that, and then I'll get to the Lechem Mishnah. His approach, the Aruch HaShulchan, is Yosef Tov Lechol Miyad Suda Shabbos B'Shleimus. Just get it out, just rip the Band-Aid off. We're having a meal. Let's bring out the challahs and let's get right down to business. He says, "Ikar kiddush b'mkom suda." That's the real way to do kiddush b'mkom suda. Anyways, we'll stop here.
Rav?
Yeah, Simi, go ahead.
Rav, I had learned that the fruit for dessert mandates a separate bracha rishona.
Yes, we've had many.
And no independent bracha achrona, such as birkat hamazon.
I recall. I remember our many debates. You didn't like that rule.
The reason I don't like that rule is when Tommy Kraus invites me to his house for Shabbos lunch, I automatically expect to get dessert. And I have that in mind when I wash. I really think that concept has to be revisited and perhaps, get this, tighten your belts, changed.
It's not parperes apas. You don't dip fruit into your. You wouldn't have a fruit and challah in the same bite. You might have salad that has some fruit in it with the challah on the plate too. So depends how you treat the fruit. Is it fruit salad at the meal? Is it a fruit in the salad at the meal, or is it a totally different part of the meal where you're having fruit? It's fun questions. All right.
Rob, thank you very much.
Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day, everybody.
You